Being the rabbi.
Okay. Let me see the participants. Mute. Okay, you're on.
Thank you. Boker Tov, everyone. The centerpiece of this week's Parsha, naturally, is the discussion of the Big Day Kahuna, of the special garments that Aaron and his sons wore that became the garments that the Kohanim wore in the time of the Mishkan and then later the first Beit HaMikdash and the second Beit HaMikdash. And as we all know, there were four basic garments that every Kohen wore: the mitznefes, the hat, the ketonet, the tunic, the trousers, and the belt. And in addition, the Kohen Gadol, these were called Big Day Lavan, white garments, because they were made from white linen. And the belt itself was shatnez. I discussed that with you this week. And then there were four Big Day Zahav, golden garments that were worn by the Kohen Gadol. So that was the tzitz, the plate on his forehead that said Kodesh La Hashem. There are different traditions as to how it was written. And then there was the ephod, the full-length apron with shoulder straps that the Kohen Gadol wore, and then the choshen, the breastplate with the precious stones, the tribes of Israel, the names inscribed upon them. And then finally there was the me'il. There was this type of an overcoat without sleeves. And the bottom it had bells and pomegranate-shaped tufts of cloth. And sort of when the Kohen Gadol walked, the bells sounded, V'nishma kolo b'vo'el HaKodesh. So that when the Kohen Gadol walked in the Beis HaMikdash, the bells announced, so to speak, his arrival. We don't have the Big Day Kahuna anymore, just as we don't have the Mishkan or the Beit HaMikdash. Yet we have this detailed description from the Torah that we read every year. And therefore it has to have relevance and meaning to us. If the Parsha of Tetzaveh was only to tell us what was, that's not what the Torah is about. So there are moral lessons, historic ideas, value systems that are symbolically represented by the garments that the Torah describes for us in detail in this week's Parsha. So the garments of the Kohen Gadol, the tzitz, the golden plate that said Kodesh La Hashem, so that's pretty much self-understood. That represents that the mind, the consciousness, the personality of every human being should be devoted to Hashem, everyone according to their abilities and talents, knowledge and circumstances. But that we live a life that is dedicated to our Creator, to bring honor, so to speak, to Him. That's what we call Kiddush Hashem. We sanctify God's name by the way that we behave, which is a uniquely Jewish concept, is that the Creator and the Master of the universe is enhanced somehow by the behavior of people, and even by the small nuances of behavior. The Chazal say that on the Pasuk, Ekev Kisishmun, Rashi says, Mitzvos Yoram Dosh Ba'akevo. Mitzvahs that people trample on. We don't think it's important. Whether I say thank you to you for doing something or not, it's not important. It's a courtesy. The Torah doesn't view it that way. The Torah views it that if I'm courteous, then to a certain extent, I'm a Kaddish Shem Shemayim. People say, look, here's a Jew that's courteous. The smallest thing is Kodesh Lashem. Therefore, the Torah tells us how to eat and what to eat, how to behave everywhere, because we are living a living manifestation of sanctifying God's name. Whatever we do reflects, so to speak, cannot diminish, but it reflects upon our Creator. Now, because of that, the Big Day Kahuna represent values. So the tzitz I just discussed with you. But the main point I want to discuss with you this morning is that of the choshen and the ephod. The ephod was an apron, covered the body of the Kohen Gadol. It had a belt, the cheshev or ephod, that was made of the same material, was part of the garment. It was multicolored. Tcheles vargomon, and it had the golden thread in it. Talar shoni, it had red thread in it, blue, turquoise. It was a magnificent garment. And it had these two shoulder straps. Now, on the shoulder strap, the Torah tells us on each of the shoulder straps, there was a large precious stone of the Shoam. We don't know exactly what kind of precious stone it was. Many different opinions as to what it looked like. Most of the opinions are of the opinion their opinion that was that it was a translucent or a white stone. So it's not that it was not ivory, but it was a precious stone. Some say that what we would call today diamonds. And it had on it engraved in it not painted on it, but engraved in it, the names of the tribes of Israel, all of the tribes, the 12 tribes, and also the names of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And so 6 of the tribes were on one shoulder strap, and 6 on the other. That was the ephod. The ephod had rings attached to it. The rings held the choshen, the breastplate. The breastplate, so half of the breastplate was tapestry, cloth, like the ephod. And half of it was in a metal case, golden, and it had 12 different precious stones, each set in its own setting, 4 rows, 3 stones in each row. And each of the stones had engraved on it the name of one of the tribes of Israel, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, etc. The cloth part of it folded to the back of the metal and stone part, and that formed like a little pocket. And in that pocket was inserted a parchment that had the Shem HaMeforash, God's name, so to speak, written upon it. And that was inserted in the choshen. The choshen was attached to the ephod. There were 4 rings, 2 on top and 2 on the bottom. And then the Torah said that lo yizach ha-choshen me'alo ephod. There's a lav in the Torah. It's not just a statement, but it's a prohibition. You should see to it that the choshen is always attached to the ephod. Why? What is the symbolism of that? So the Meforshim explain here, and it's a wonderful insight into the job, so to speak, of the Kohen Gadol. When the Kohen Gadol performed, so he had to wear the uniform. If he was mechusar begadim, if he didn't have the correct clothes on, then avodatso psula, then what he did was not acceptable. What's the difference? Why can't he do it in a t-shirt and jeans? Why does it have to be only with those garments? So the Meforshim all explained that the garments were symbolic. They were there to guide the Kohen Gadol, to guide the high priest as to what his task was. What is his task? So the Navi said, Kisifsei Kohen Yishmeru Das, the lips of the Kohen should guard knowledge. So one of his tasks is education, to teach the people, to explain the Torah to the people. V'Torah yavakshu mipiyu. And if he does that, then the people will come and ask him to explain the Torah to them. It's reciprocal. If A wants to give, then B wants to receive. But if A wants to hold the Torah for oneself and not to share it, the Torah belongs to me, but not to thee. So then after a while, nobody will be interested in that person's Torah. Ki malach Hashem tzvokosu. He has to be an angel of God. In other words, when you looked at the Kohen Gadol, you had to think, oh, this is a human being that the Lord created that justifies the entire universe, all of the creations, all of the creatures, the whole enormous panoply of nature that we experience every day. It's all worth it because look at this person. My father, of blessed memory, always would tell me his Rebbe, he went to the yeshiva in Grodno in Polish Lithuania between the wars. The Rosh Yeshiva was Reb Shimon Shkop. Reb Shimon Shkop was a Kohen. Also at a time when most Jews were, how shall I put it nicely, they were not of National Basketball Association size. They were short. When I grew up, my father was 5'10", 5'11", he was considered a giant. Reb Shimon was tall. And he had a magnificent presence, a handsome, beautiful countenance. So my father said that whenever Reb Shimon used to deliver the lecture in the yeshiva, my father always thought, that's what the Kohen Gadol must have looked like. Because you have to have a picture of what the Kohen Gadol looked like. Because if you have a picture of what the Kohen Gadol looks like, then you have a picture of what, so to speak, God wants a human being to look like. So the Kohen Gadol wore the choshen and the ephod, the breastplate and this apron, and they were attached to each other. Not only attached to each other, was forbidden to separate them. And the Kohen Gadol had, because of that on his chest, this choshen, and because the parchment was inserted in the pocket, it became the Urim V'Tumim. It became the method by which questions could be answered. Policies could be examined, programs could be created. If you had, the Jewish people had a question that they had to have answered. So they asked the Kohen Gadol, wearing this set of clothing and wearing the choshen and ephod, and the letters of the tribes lit up. Now, how to read it, that the Novi had to do. You had to have Ruach HaKodesh to be able to read the Urim V'Tumim, because it could be 8 letters, but which one is first and which is second? How do you put it together? But that was the Urim V'Tumim. And in the time of the first temple, the Urim V'Tumim was present. And we find a number of times in Tanakh how it was employed in times of war and in times of peace, when basic decisions had to be made. So the Kohen Gadol walked around with an eternal miracle on his chest. One of the items that was missing in the second temple was that the Urim V'Tumim was no longer operative. There were 5 things that were missing in the second temple that existed in the first temple. One of them that was missing was the Urim V'Tumim. The Urim V'Tumim is such a gift that it's unimaginable to us. Imagine if we had an Urim. Imagine if you could ask, is this a good law or a bad law? Is this what we should do in Corona or not?
Which way is Facebook going?
So that was a gift, but it was not permanent. So it's recorded for us that the ephod had these 2 large precious stones that had all the names inscribed upon it, on the stones, but not as individual stones. So the ephod, the Meforshim explain, represent the totality of the Jewish people, the unity of the Jewish people. The society, the country, the nationality, whatever word we want to use. The Choshen, which was 12 separate stones, not only separate stones, but each of the stones was a different mineral than any of the others. That represented the individual of the Jewish people, the individuality, the uniqueness of each and every Jew. We all know the famous medrash that when Yosef HaTzadik was tempted by the wife of Potiphar when he was a slave in Egypt. So there are many midrashim as to how he was able to overcome the situation and not defile himself. And one of midrashim was that he saw the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol, and he saw that his name would not be on it. Yosef wouldn't be there. Everybody else would be there. Binyamin, Yisachar, Zvulun, everybody, all the brothers. And Yosef would not be on it. And he said to himself, how can that be? And that was enough to create him as Yosef HaTzadik and bring him to greatness. So everybody has a stone. Everybody has their name engraved on the breast of the Kohen Gadol. Now, there are many times in life, maybe even most times in life, a majority of times, when the desire or the good of the individual and the desire and the good of the community are not identical. They clash. It's been from time immemorial. we want to be free. We don't want anybody to tell us what to do. Yet we're all sitting here with masks on, except me. My freedom is compromised by the fact that the government, the society, the general good, so to speak, demands a certain mode of behavior or action, demands that I give a portion of my money to the government, to the general society. It demands that young people have to go to the army. All sorts of demands are made. So you have a contradiction between the two stones on the shoulder straps of the Kohen Gadol, which represent the society as a whole, the community as a whole, and the Choshen, the individual stones which he carries on his breast, which represent the individual choices of people. It's 12 tribes. Every tribe is different. There are no two the same. One of the basic lessons of Judaism is that the Jewish people are composed of different tribes, different personalities, different outlooks, different requirements, different necessities. It's not one size fits all. And the problem always is when people want to impose the one size fits all on all, then you undoubtedly have resistance. So how do you reconcile the two? How do you reconcile the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol with his shoulder straps? And not only that, the Torah says they both have to be omnipresent. They have to be together. You cannot only consider one element. You have to always consider both elements. So oftentimes it's very hard to be able to do that. How much freedom, so to speak, can we allow everybody without it becoming anarchy? On the other hand, how much control can we allow without it becoming totalitarian and dictatorship? So there has to be a balance. So in the time of the Mishkan and the first temple, the balance was found in the Urim V'Tumim. The Urim V'Tumim told you where the balance was, where the line should be drawn. The second Beis Hamikdash, where there was no Urim V'Tumim, so the Gemara itself points out that wearing the garments is what made the Kohen. Now it's up to the Kohen to find the balance. The Kohen Gadol. So we had great people that were Kohanim Gedolim, and we had others that really did not meet the requirements of the job. But at least it was clearly defined what the task was. What is the general good and what is the individual good? What do we do when they clash, when they are not in harmony? So somehow we have to satisfy both. That's the idea, lo yizach hachoshen ma'alo ephod. Can't say, well, we'll take the choshen away and it'll only be the ephod, which is the society, the large stones, everybody in the world can't do that. But on the other hand, you can't give in either. Because every individual, what every individual wants, you cannot create a society or a people on that basis. So the Kohen Gadol had a great task. He was seen as the conciliator of the Jewish people. He held them together. That's why Aaron was so loved. Because Aaron took everything into consideration. When Aaron passed away, the entire congregation of Israel wept and mourned because he was Ohev Shalom, Rodev Shalom, Ohev Esabrios, Mekorvan LaTorah. That's the Kohen Gadol. Now the Kohen Gadol's task was seen, therefore, as being the harmonizer, the one that made everything work, that put it together. The task of the king or the government was to lead, which oftentimes is brings friction, division. And that's why Chazal always saw that the Kohen Gadol was one job and the Melech was another job, and that it should not be combined within one person, because their tasks are not identical, and sometimes they don't even fit together. That was the problem that the rabbi saw with the Chashmonoim. The Chashmonoim were Kohanim. Shimon HaChashmonai was a Kohen Gadol. If he became the king as well, then it's you got two separate jobs that are sometimes antagonistic one to another, united in one person. That's never going to work. And that's why we had later that Alexander Yanai, they told him, Hanach lecha keser melucha. It's enough that you have that you're the Kohen Gadol. Don't take for yourself the kingship. The Ramban says that it was one of the reasons why the Chashmonaim failed. That there are no descendants of the Chashmonaim today amongst the Jewish people. So this idea of the Choshen and the Ephod, of going together, the general good of society and the particular good of a person, that many times cannot go in harmony. The task of the Kohen Gadol was somehow to create a harmonious relationship, to go out for the interests of both, to make certain that the Choshen and the Ephod were always bound together, that were not separate. That became the task of the Kahuna. And therefore, that is why the Ovos, in Ovos, it says that Heve mitalmido shalaro. It is something that all of us should emulate. Something that all of us should try to bring into our lives, to harmonize the general good with our personal good, our personal needs, and to create, therefore, the balance that allows for the Urim V'Tumim to function and for our lives to be Kodesh LaHashem. Thank you very much. Have a Shabbat Shalom, Kol Tuv Sel.
Shabbat shalom.
Which way will the stock market go? That's all.
Very
That didn't answer.
Only two of us for communal questions, though, not for personal questions.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
right,
it's a-
right.
it's
And
a-
how do they answer them with Hannah and Ellie?
Thank you very much. Good Shabbos.
We could.
Shabbat shalom. Good Shabbos.